Hey, Kevin Coy here from selfreliantlife.com, and did a video a couple of weeks ago that really seemed to hit a nerve, and that was the $66 a month to live in tiny house that we did a tour on. It's about 80,000 views now on that video, and a lot of conversation that came up as a result of that, and it was something that we did without realizing what kind of an impact there was going to be, or how much interest there was going to be in that conversation. And so I thought I'd do a follow-up video today, and just sort of kind of having gone through all the conversations that we had in comments and so forth on the video, and actually looking at the demographic of people that responded to that video, which was really interesting to me. And so what I wanted to do is give you a little bit more tips and some of the secrets that I've learned over the last decade or so about living inexpensively, and the title of the video has to do with a word called geo-arbitrage, and that may be familiar to some of you, and it may be like, did you just make that up? To some people, I don't know. But it was coined by a guy by the name of Tim Ferriss. Basically, he sort of owned that phrase when he created a book called The 4-Hour Workweek about 14 years ago. And what it really equals out to is lifestyle design, or lifestyle by design. And I'm going to explain what geo-arbitrage is in a minute, but I thought I'd just kind of talk a few minutes prior to that, just to kind of get some context here. What a lot of people are doing is looking for a way to live less expensively. I mean, face it, we're looking at some pretty crazy costs of living in the country these days, and the closer you get to what seems to be the higher paying jobs and careers in a given area, the higher the cost of living gets to be along with it. And so, I think what people are looking for is a way to make good money and not have to pay a small fortune out in living costs to boot. And so I see a lot of people have an interest in this. A lot of women were interested in this more so than men in this response on this last video we did. And people from the age of about 45 to 65 had a big interest in this topic, and that's what we discovered in doing our analytics and looking back. And a lot of people were really, I think they've had it with trying to own a home or own a big house, and all the trappings of that lifestyle go along with this big income. I think right now what they're really looking for, and I'm just spitballing here a little bit based on the feedback, is just a decent living. They're not so much, I think they've really kind of just said the heck with these big houses and having a big mortgage and all that. I think that's pretty well a sign of the times. That's why so many people are so fascinated with tiny houses and just living in a smaller lifestyle, because of the cost of it is so much less. And so geo-arbitrage, getting back to that, has to do with living in an area that's less expensive while still maintaining a larger income like you would see in a more expensive area that has the command of those big careers and higher dollars. And so what I see most commonly, what people are doing, is because living closer into that job or that career, all the housing in that area costs so much, they're moving further away and then commuting back and forth. And so that's like the first sort of geo-arbitrage that I see in my mind, is people commuting. And so you might have found a community that's an hour and a half or more away from where you work, but the housing prices are a lot less because of the distance, and so they say, hey, let's go buy a house out here, and then we can drive in and out, or we can take the train or whatever it is you're doing to get back and forth, but you got this extra time added onto your day getting back and forth, and the traffic and the cost of that. And so that's a real basic geo arbitrage, and that's because they have a fixed place where they have to work every day, and so that limits them on how far away they can live from that job and still make it reasonable to have a, you know, some sort of shelter or housing or whatever that isn't astronomical. And so what I'm proposing, or what geo arbitrage really I think in essence is the ability to not be location dependent. And so maybe instead of having that fixed job where you have to show up every day, you have that skill set or those job qualifications, and you can leverage those in a way that doesn't require you to show up to a fixed location. So you can be location independent. Maybe you're telecommuting rather than driving to work. Maybe you're freelancing your skill set and selling it to people that need it but don't want to hire somebody full-time. And maybe you just create you know, an income that you can basically do online through the internet or by telephone or combination thereof, which allows you to live pretty much wherever you want to. So now you've still got that good income coming in, but you're not subject to living in a high-priced area in order to command that dollar. So now you go live in a community that's, you know, anywhere else. There's a lot, I mean, we all know that the cost of living varies greatly throughout the country here. If you want to live in New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or somewhere, you're going to spend a lot of money to live there, because that dictates that. The jobs are higher, the population's denser, and can you know, charge more for rent or housing because of the demand. And so to get the best of both worlds, you try to hold on to that income that comes out of an area that's that economically high, and move to an area with a lower economy, maybe a rural area or an area that's far enough out that your housing costs and so forth is a lot less. And that's really blending the both worlds and being able to come out ahead. So Anissa and I, you know, committed, if you will, geo arbitrage, and that doesn't sound like a felony. It's just a description of our lifestyle design that we've done many years ago. We actually currently live in what's arguably the poorest county in the state that we live in. And so the economy here is very low. It's a tourism economy, and that tourism does not go year-round. It's just a seasonal tourism, and so the cost of living here is relatively low because there's just not a lot of jobs, money, you know, being generated in the area. And so and for folks that want to live here and work here, they're going to look at a lot of low-end dollar jobs in the tourism industry as a way to make, you know, money. If you're doing that, then your cost of living could be relative to a higher income area that has a higher price rental or housing cost. So that would just be a lateral move. But what you want to do is you want to take that high income that you're generating over here and move to this lower economy where the cost of housing and living is much less. And so to do that, you need to be able to take that skill set and leverage that out of the economy. And so as long as you're not dependent on your local economy to create that income, you can live wherever you want to. And we discovered that, you know, the things that we created in the way of services that we now offer from our own business that we developed are something that we can do online and live anywhere. As long as we've got an internet connection, a telephone, a laptop, we can do business in what our skill sets are anywhere in the country or even anywhere in the world. Certainly there are lower cost areas in this country, and, you know, even out of the country it can get considerably less expensive if you want to go live in third world countries. Now the quality of life is good there. It's just the cost of living. Their dollar isn't as strong as the U.S. dollar. So if you can make U.S. dollars and live in an area where there's a lower economy again in another country, you can certainly benefit and live a far higher quality of life than you would if you were up here. So those are a couple of things to think about. Now, if you want to stay in the country and you want to stay in the vicinity of where your job or your income opportunity is, then maybe you need to look at some alternative living scenarios, whether temporary or long-term, entirely up to you depending on what your goals are. A lot of folks will live in a lot higher cost area for a time and try to save money so that they can move to a lower cost area later and be able to have higher purchasing power for, say, housing or that lifestyle. And a lot of people do that as they retire. They live in a higher priced area, and then when they retire they sell out, move into a lower economy where their dollar goes a lot farther. They can pay cash for a house with the money they've made maybe selling the house over here, and or the money they've saved, and then they can live a lot less expensive lifestyle and still have a great quality of life. So that's kind of what the purpose is here, is to live tiny, live inexpensively, cheaply, and yet still be able to garner that larger wage from an area that has a stronger economy, or more like the world economy. You know, once you put your goods or services online, they're for sale anywhere. Some of the products that we sell all over the world, and some of the services we sell nationwide and internationally. And so we have the ability to you know, open up, instead of just in a city that you're living in, you know, the entire continent or the entire world could be, you know, a way for you to create an income. So that's something to think about. So, you know, you can telecommute. Maybe the job you have now will allow you to continue to work if you move away, and so you telecommute in and out rather than having to drive to it. Or maybe you become a contract worker or a freelancer and stay with that company on some sort of an agreement that you create with them to continue to do the work or some facet of that work. Okay, you might be thinking, you know what, I don't want to live in Panama or, you know, some other little tiny town in the middle of nowhere that I don't know of. And I don't even know how to hardly check my email, let alone start an online business, and I wouldn't even know where to go to get started. So, you know, again, my demographic on that last video was, the strongest was 45 to 65-year-old people, and it was 60+% women that were interested or watching this video. And so that's who I'm, you know, trying to appeal to. I saw that this seemed to be a kind of a pain point for folks in that age range and demographic. So what if you just want to keep your job? So you're still figuring out, okay, how do I just live less expensively and keep my job? Well, maybe I don't know if you're renting or owning. Maybe you want to give that up and live in a smaller home. And I don't mean you necessarily have to go buy or build a little tiny house on a trailer and figure out, okay, well, where am I going to park this thing? I don't know, because again, the closer into these larger communities, the harder it is to get away with things like that, because of the rules and regulations that prohibit it. So one of the biggest things that I've heard everybody complaining about is, tiny houses sound great, but where the heck can we put one that's legal? Well, the farther out you go, the easier that gets to be. So we're kind of back to that commuting dilemma, or you know, telecommuting or whatever. So let's just talk about, how can I live inexpensively in a high income area, in a high cost of living area. And again, don't get hung up on a time frame here. Just look at it from a goal standpoint. I want to make it to X date in my life. I may want to try to hit a certain monetary goal of X number of dollars saved, or you know, till I get to retirement, or I don't know what you're trying to do, but let's just focus on the goal rather than the time frame, and say, okay, what can I do to just slash my costs, live super cheap, live tiny, still command a nice dollar, you know, get away with that for a period of time until I get to where I want to go in life. So there are alternative living arrangements that you can get to, and I've had a conversation with a few people here just as of late. Maybe you spend part-time renting a room from somebody so that you can stay in that demographic where the money is and yet not have to spend exorbitant amounts of it on cost of living for housing and so forth, or that you don't want to spend hours and hours of your day commuting back and forth in a vehicle. So you make an arrangement with somebody, whether it's a friend, a relative, or an Airbnb or whatever it is you're doing, and you're couch surfing or you're renting a room on a part-time basis in order to cut that cost. Maybe you're taking a studio apartment rather than a 3-bedroom house. So now again, you've cut your cost of living drastically. Maybe what it is you're going to do is you're going to do something very alternative, and maybe you want to live on a boat. A lot of people live in a sailboat in a marina near where they're working, and that costs less than a house. Maybe you want to live in a van. There's a lot of interest in what they call the van life, where people are buying vans. Some of them are these big Sprinter vans, and they're building them into campers, and they're living in that arrangement so that again they can live, kind of wherever they want to park, and that may or may not allow, depending on the regulations of an area, but you can do what they call stealth camping or parking, where you have a very nondescript vehicle that doesn't, scream, I'm living in my van, and you can just park it right in a neighborhood or in some setting in an area where nobody's really, noticing it, and you can get away with sleeping there as long as you keep it down. You're not going to run stereo and get away with that, but that's not the point here. Maybe it's an RV. Maybe it's even your car. I've seen a number of people get to the point where they're living in their car and they're parking somewhere in the evening so they can sleep, and they get a gym membership so they can shower and whatever they're doing. There's a combination of things there. Or maybe you live in an RV like we did for 2.5 years, and I mean we weren't slumming it by any means. It was pretty luxurious living. In fact, if you want to check out the video tour we just did on the other video we did a couple weeks ago, I'll put a link down below so you can go see what that is. But the bottom line is we lived in that RV for 2.5 years for $66 a month. And that was really what I think caught everybody's attention. And the reason it costs us $66 a month, I'm going to explain this because a lot of people seem to not get this figured out. I sold the RV for $2,000 less than what I paid for it. We lived in it for 2.5 years, 30 months. When you divide 2,000 by 30, you get $66. That was our cost of living to be in that RV for 2.5 years while we were building a very small house, which is what we live in now. If you're not familiar with the channel, check it out. It's a 24 by 36 square foot house. 1/3 of that's just patio, so the house is actually 24 by 24, 12 by 36 patio. We built it for about $30,000. It's right on the beach out here. I don't know if you can hear the surf in the background, but the beach is right through the trees that way. And we live in a very nice little community, very economically depressed community, but a great place to live. This is just a nice, quiet, sleepy beach town community. The water's right there. You can go out. We go out there every day and walk up and down the beach and do our beach combing and whatever and hang out. It's the best of both worlds. We brought our income with us. We don't rely on the local economy, and haven't for a lot of years, even where we used to live, which was, funny enough, the second poorest county in the state we moved from. We're location independent. We can live where we want. It's cheap to live here. The amenities are great. If we don't even work full time in order to support the lifestyle we're living here. That's really what this is all about. So living in a temporary scenario like an RV or a van or a boat or a car or a tiny house or whatever it is you find that resonates with you, that works for you, living in a rented room or a studio apartment, whatever you got to do to be able to get to the high dollars, save the money, and get out and go live somewhere where you want to live, economically easier to live in, is geo arbitrage. Go to the high end, make the money, go to the low end, live in a very nice high quality of life, in an area that doesn't cost an arm and a leg to live in, and you've got the best of both worlds. And you can do this before you retire. That's the idea here, is not to have to wait till you're 65 or 70 in order to say, okay, now I can afford to go do this. It's to do it now and get there and start living a higher quality of life by design, okay? So geo arbitrage equals lifestyle design, best of both worlds. That's what we were talking about. I hope this helps you. If you like what you're seeing, check out the link to the other video, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell so you'll know when the next video comes out, and I'll see you on the next video.